Feng, if you guys remember her from our retreat this year too. So wanted to make sure that they're welcome and also hand the time over to them. Audris was my classmate and Andrew's classmate here too. And we graduated together. She trained in Orlando Regional Medical Center, which is the county hospital in Orlando. And she reached out to me to actually see if she can share something that she has shared not only on Kevin MD, but all throughout her other physician friends throughout the nation. So please give your time to her.
Hi, so like she said, my name is Dr. Audris Ball. I actually went to medical school here in Loma Linda and then went on to complete my pediatric residency in Orlando in 2018 of June, so last June. And since then I actually got to spend some time and take a break, and it really gave me the opportunity to look at my experiences in residency, look at what I've learned, look at the challenges, and even how to learn how to heal from that. But I do want to thank you all for giving me this time to share my story and to give you some tips that I've learned and hopefully it'll be helpful to you guys. But I do want to acknowledge that this is residency, so all of you are going to have different views on wellness. And so I don't know what your mindset is about wellness. Maybe you're here and you're like, another wellness lecture? Like, why? Like, why? Like, this is residency, just deal with it. Like, it is what it is. Or maybe you are stressed out and you really don't care what I'm about to tell you, and you're thinking about all the 10 notes that you still have to do. You're thinking about the orders you still have to put. Your attending this morning was mad at you and you don't know what to do about that. Maybe you have a patient that you have to explain the diagnosis for the 5th time. Or even maybe you have a nurse that's calling you over and over again. You're just stressed out and you're probably just zoned, like, don't really care what I'm saying. Or maybe you're just super tired, like you just want to go to sleep. Like, it doesn't even matter, like you just want to go to sleep and wonder, when is residency gonna be over, because I'm tired. Or maybe you're actually discouraged and overwhelmed and you just feel like everything that you do is not working out for you. You just wonder what you're even doing in residency. Or maybe you are living your best life. Maybe residency is your dream and you're just A+, like you love this experience, and kudos to you. Or maybe you're not really in any of these mindsets, or maybe you're in a mixture. I don't know where your mind is at this afternoon, but I do want to acknowledge that, given that there are so many mindsets about wellness, that whatever I'm going to share with you today, I hope that it's going to be helpful. I hope that it'll give you some insight, and I hope that it'll be encouraging and maybe even inspiring to you all. So it was 5:30 in the morning. I was driving to work. It was during the beginning of my 2nd year of my residency. I was in an inpatient block. It felt like that block was never going to end. It just seemed like all I did was go to work in the dark and leave work in the dark, and all you do is eat, work, and sleep for 6 days, and then the 7th day is just your time to maybe catch up on the laundry that's been piling up and catch up on errands, and then maybe sleep the whole day. And that's just kind of the cycle that goes on that went on in my mind. So on this morning that I was driving, I just started thinking, like, what are the things that I have to do for my patients? How many patients did they get overnight? Like, I hope I don't have to do an admission during my pre-rounding time. Like, that will just mess up my flow. I wonder, what, if any, mistakes I'm gonna make that day. I wondered, are there gonna be any times that day that I'm gonna get in trouble? I was thinking about the time yesterday when I didn't answer the question right on rounds, and that just felt humiliating because it was like in front of all of the nurses. I felt like I was thinking about that specialist that was saying that I was incompetent, that I wasn't able to to answer his questions appropriately. I was thinking about the patient that was angry because of something that I didn't have control over. So all of these things were just in my mind as I was driving, and it just felt overwhelming because I was like, wow, there's like nothing that I do is right. I just felt overwhelmed. I felt like I was a worthless person, like I didn't matter. Nothing that I did mattered. And I, started going into this negative thought cycle, and it just really was overwhelming for me. So as I started thinking about this, it just felt like I was in the ocean, like kind of in the water, just trying to keep my head above, just bobbing up above the water. But death at that time kind of seemed like a peaceful solution. And this thought process, it wasn't the first time that I thought about that. It was actually that whole year that I was dealing with these thoughts, and every single day it was just a battle. And for the couple of months, I had actually thought about, death kind of kept on creeping up every single day. And so as I was driving and I saw this overpass, it was a bridge that I had driven over multiple times, millions of times, but this time what if I just go over that bridge? What if I just go over it, plunge to the bottom, and that's it? That heaviness won't ever be in my life anymore. And I could just be at peace finally, because I was so done. And so as I thought about this, I started driving fast. And something inside me was like, no, what are you doing? And at that moment, I woke up and I was like, this is crazy. Did I actually just want to go over this overpass? Did my life just become this norm of thinking this negative thought cycle and thinking, death is actually an actual answer for that? So I really just realized, wow, I know residency is going to be hard, but I never knew it was going to be like this. So that day I decided actually to reach out to our physician coach that was part of our residency program. And that was probably the best decision I ever made in my life, because I actually, was able to turn my life around and get a better perspective. So maybe you're thinking well, why didn't you get help earlier? Why'd you let it go for so long? And why, didn't you know that residency is going to be hard? Didn't you know? But at the same time, when you're dealing with this, sometimes you just don't really realize that you're in such a deep hole. And at least that was for me. And for me, I thought, depression, and actually naming it depression, that's a weakness. Doctors don't have depression. They don't, have these issues. They're able to just be mentally strong. They're able to push through, and that's what doctors do. And that's what I thought. And I literally thought that I was, the only one in my program that felt like that. I was the only one and everybody had it together. So I tried to push it down and I tried to cover it, but eventually, that overtook me and caught up with me. So that was something that I really realized, going from that feeling of being at the top all the time in high school, in college, and then finally get to med school and to residency, and that's not really the fact anymore. You might not be at the top anymore. And that approval addiction that some of us have, it's not appeased anymore. So you have to, be able to figure out, what is it that I'm dealing with. So as I started to get help and started to really figure out, what are my next steps, I started to really accept that I did have depression, but that took me a while. But as I started to research, I looked into physician depression, physician burnout, and there are so many physicians that are dealing with this. So I wanted to show you this fact sheet that I found on ACGME's website. It's by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. But I wanted you to look at these two boxes. So the first one, or the two facts that I boxed. So the first one says 300 physicians die by suicide in the US per year. That's the equivalent of 3 medical school classes dying a year. That's a lot. And then this second part, 28% of residents have major depressive episode versus 7 to 8% of similar aged individuals. Well, why is that? Like, why is it more in residents versus similar aged individuals? Well, let's think about that. What's the criteria for a major depressive disorder? And I'm sure all of you know it by heart. You think about SIGI-CAS, right? Well, let's look at that a little bit more. So with major depressive disorder, you have to have at least 5 of the 9 symptoms, and it has to last at least 2 weeks. One of the symptoms has to be depressed mood or irritable mood. And there can't be any medical causes for the change in mood, and it can't have any, or you can't have any emotional trauma that happened. So let's kind of compare what are the symptoms of depression, and then what is residency in general. So residency, most rotations, especially in general, are 2 to 4 weeks. Now think about that rotation that is especially difficult, that you really don't like, and that's more challenging. You might have a depressed mood or an irritable mood because of that. And if you feel like all you do is work, then you're gonna have decreased interest or pleasure in activities. And if you have significant stress, that can definitely change your appetite, and it can lead to appetite changes. Sleep, I mean, you're going from day shift to night shift. You're doing 28-hour shifts. You might have stress, and so that's causing insomnia. You are going to have some sleep changes. And just the nature of being a resident, you're going to have fatigue, loss of energy, and just having that negative feedback from everyone around you, whether it's attendings, whether it's the patients, whether it's even your co-residents, that could cause you to feel worthless and guilty. So if all of these things aren't being addressed, suicidal thoughts can definitely arise. But what am I saying? Am I saying that every resident is depressed? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that with residency, it is a perfect storm for depression to come about. And you think about, wow, this is something that really does happen. And if you are feeling like this, you're not alone. So I did want to bring up this Medscape report that I found for 2019. They actually took 15,000 physicians. And here they talk about, are you burned out or depressed? So burnout, that's kind of controversial at this point. Like, should we call it burnout? Should we call it moral injury? But these are the definitions. So with burnout, you have long-term unresolvable job stress that leads to exhaustion and feeling overwhelmed, cynical, detached from the job, lacking sense of personal accomplishment. And then you have colloquial depression, which is just that feeling down, and then clinical depression, which we actually just talked about earlier. So looking at this, 44% of physicians feel burned out, and then 11% feel that colloquial depression, and 4% feel clinically depressed. So that's basically half of those physicians that answered with one of those criteria. And then looking at suicide. So have you ever felt suicidal? So 14% actually said yes. 1% said that they've actually attempted. But what I really found interesting was this question: do you plan to seek help for burnout or depression? Look how many people said no and they don't plan on seeking help. That's 64%. Now, granted, maybe some of these people are like, I don't even have burnout or depression, and I don't need to answer yes to this. But what about those people that are having burnout and depression, and they're saying, no, I don't do that. I don't need the help with that. So that's still a large percentage. So this is a picture of an event held by Dr. Pamela Whipple. She is an advocate for physician wellness. She even has a book that she wrote about just memoirs of physicians that have written her about the stresses that they've gone through and just kind of the depression that they've gone through. But she basically had a tribute to physicians that have lost their lives to suicide in this event. And it just goes to show you, that if individuals allow that negative spiral thought process and depression to just go without being treated, that suicide is a very real possibility. And just the faces of these physicians that lost their lives is just proof of that. So now what? What do we do about that? Well, there's a lot of different ideas of how to help with this. And there's a lot of physicians that are speaking out about it, which is awesome. We just saw that video earlier. And some of those people are like Z-Dog, Pamela Whipple, and Dr. Shanafelt. He actually is the director of Stanford's WellMD Center, which is a leader of physician wellness. And he actually has done some research studies about this area as well. But he says wellness goes beyond merely the absence of distress and includes being challenged, thriving, and achieving success in various aspects of personal and professional life. So, wellness is an important thing to focus on, but I think that a lot of times we have this superficial view of wellness. I remember during my third year residency, to do that wellness criteria, you had the module about sleep that we had to watch. You had the occasional social event. You had, yoga sessions, which all of those are helpful. But for me, I don't think that really helped me. I think what really helped me was learning about my relationships and having positive relationships. And that's relationships with yourself and then relationships with others. So that's really the basis of emotional intelligence. And what is emotional intelligence? Well, it's the capacity for understanding our own feelings and the feelings of others, for motivating ourselves, and for managing our emotions effectively in our relationships with others. So you're not dominated by them, you are able to use them in constructive ways. I love how Travis Bradbury says it. He says, it's the ability to make emotions work for you instead of against you. How many of you have ever had your emotions work against you? I'm pretty sure a lot of us have. But wouldn't it be awesome to actually use them for you? So there's 5 aspects of emotional intelligence. So there's self-awareness, which is knowing your emotions. There is self-regulation, which is managing our emotions. There's internal motivation, which is motivating yourself to achieve those goals. There's empathy, which is recognizing emotions in others. And then there's social skills, which is managing relationships with others. And the great thing about emotional intelligence, it's not just a female thing. It's something that everybody can benefit from, male and female. And it can be something that can be learned and also improved on. So all of you are amazing, intelligent, strong, resilient, and talented. All of you here. Just to be in residency, all of you are those things. But that's not going to be true for you, regardless of what anyone says, unless you believe it yourself. So going into the first aspect, self-awareness, knowing your emotion. So how well do you know yourself? How well are you able to identify those emotions and those thoughts that you have? How well do you know those automatic thoughts that come and those self-silent talks that come up? So questions to consider. At any moment when you're in rounds, when you're sitting here, are you able to identify what are the emotions I'm having? What are the thoughts I'm having about this? And where do you get your self-worth from? That was something that I really struggled with, because for me, self-worth was so deeply rooted in approval addiction and in perfectionism. And that might have worked for me in high school and in college and probably got me into med school, but when things started to crumble and I wasn't getting those things anymore, that's when I realized, where does my self-worth come from? And when it was at that time that I was able to really confront myself and change my view of myself, that really made a difference for me. So this is a model by life coach Brooke Castillo. So she basically says, your circumstances lead to your thoughts about it, and then your thoughts create your emotions guide your action or inaction, and then your action or inaction leads to a positive or negative result. But what I really want to focus on is the thoughts create our emotions. Like, how crazy is that? Your thoughts are so powerful. If you're having a negative feeling that you just want to get rid of, you can think a different thought and create a different emotion. And so just understanding your emotions and then being able to trace back to those thoughts, that is a big part of self-awareness. So she actually describes, those silent thoughts, those negative automatic thoughts, like a 2-year-old wreaking havoc in your mind that's not even supervised. So it's just kind of wreaking havoc and you just aren't able to control it. But if you're able to be aware of those thoughts, then that's when you can start to make changes. So how do you become aware? Well, I wanted to show you this process that Brooke Castillo has taught where it's a thought download, and I wanted to go to the example just because it makes more sense. So on a piece of paper, just divide it in half. On one side put emotion, and then on the other side put thought. And when you list all the emotions that you have, then you can go back and say, well, what is the cause of my emotion? So with the first one, sadness. So you just witnessed an attending pronounce a patient who you've been taking care of for 2 weeks, brain dead. Now, with this emotion, it's actually appropriate to have that. Not all negative emotions are bad. You can't just walk around always happy, and because that would be kind of disturbing. If you're at a funeral and you're laughing, like, that's not right. So it's also important to recognize if an emotion is appropriate or not. So for the last one though, insecure. So this one, I am not intelligent because I continue to answer questions wrong during patient rounds. Okay, well, that's a little bit more destructive, right? That's not an appropriate emotion. That is actually an all or nothing type of statement, and that's actually more destructive to you. So actually being able to understand your emotions, understand the appropriateness of your emotions is so important. It's just like if you had a kid that goes to you for a cough, you're not just gonna be like, here's some albuterol, hope you feel better. No, you're gonna ask questions. You're gonna try to figure out what is the diagnosis. And that is so crucial, right? Because when you get the diagnosis, you're able to guide management. And it's the same thing here. You have to be aware of those emotions and the thoughts that's creating those emotions, because that's gonna guide how you're gonna change it, right? So this is a quote from Jen Sincero. She has colorful language, I know, but I really liked the concept of what she brings. So she says, if you want to stay stuck in the same place and keep getting spanked with the same lessons over and over, be negative, resentful, and victimized. But if you want to get over your issues and rock your life, be grateful, look for the good, and learn. So that goes to our second aspect, self-regulation, managing our emotions. So this is going to be, once you're able to really understand your emotions, this allows you to now regulate your behavior that can come from those emotions. So you can prevent impulsive behavior, and you can turn the situations into a better situation using it for improvement versus on dwelling on something that's negative. So things that you can ask yourself, well, how do I react? If something bad happens, if a mistake happens, do I just go and yell at every single intern in the room and just like go, why did you do this? Or do you just go into a room and cry in the darkness? Like, what do you do? How do you react? What are those triggers that you have? And Are you willing to get help? So this is a exercise by Jen Sincero. She calls it the BS thought replacement, her language, not mine. But she basically, you take the piece of paper and then you split it in half. And on one side, so you take those thoughts that you had in that separate exercise, and then now you put it all on that left side. And then on the right side, you think about, is there a way that I can change the perspective that I have of this thought into a positive or even just a neutral? So, for example, that first one, I'm not intelligent because I continue to answer questions wrong during patient rounds. Well, what if you changed it to not answering a question does not make me unintelligent, but it now has added to my knowledge base. Now I just know something different from those wrong answers. See how that really changes your perspective? See how that can now make something negative into something good? So that's kind of the aspect of that self-regulation. So this is the famous words from Professor Dumbledore from Harry Potter. He says, "You will also find that help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it." Of course, this is Loma Linda, so it'll always be given at Loma Linda. But I really believe that the resources that we have in the hospital or anywhere, this really, is underutilized just because we don't really ask for it. We don't really look for it. And a lot of that is because of fear. We don't want to, look like that weak person that's going to the counselor, But if you just ask, you're going to get help. So please have the courage to ask help and accept help. I know it's hard sometimes, but just don't wait till it's too late. You matter, and it's important that you take time to love yourself and take care of yourself, both mentally and emotionally. And know that you're not alone. You have support here. And the stigma of mental illness will still continue to remain among all of you, among your institution, if we're able to discuss it freely, able to encourage people to get the help that they need, we can start breaking down that stigma. And just, if you do get help, don't feel ashamed about it. It's actually something that you should feel empowered about, that you're getting help to be a better version of yourself. So when you start to go through those aspects of self-awareness, self-regulation, that can be a tough situation, especially when you're uncovering those deep thoughts and those deep-rooted things that you've been dealing with all your life. And that can be really tough in residency when it's already hard. And so this is something that I think counseling and physician coaching is such a great help for. In my program, we actually were required to see our physician coach at least 1 to 2 times a year. I thought that this was crazy, and a lot of my fellow residents were like, well, that's annoying, like that's such a waste of time. Well, once I actually gave it a chance, it actually is helpful. So I like to think of this as a 9-month well child visit. I don't know if you guys have had these parents, but I've had parents say to me, well, why do I need to bring my child to this 9-month visit? There's no vaccines given. Like, what? Why do I need to come? My kid's fine. Well, for me, obviously you're going to say, well, that's not the whole point of that visit. You're checking growth. You're checking that they're physically well. You're checking their development. And yeah, most of the time those 9-month-olds are fine. And they're walking around, or not walking around, but crawling around and doing great. But you do get those few that actually have some delay in development or some delay in growth. And so you can definitely help them in that early stage. So that's what I think about with counseling. It's just the check-in, making sure that you're doing okay. If you're doing okay, then great. If there's a little bit of overwhelming feelings, then it's great that you can actually catch that early before those thoughts and that overwhelming feeling grows. So thinking about it in that way really helps me. It's primary care for your emotional health. And so if you just need that extra help, just ask for help and accept that help. So this is a quote from Brooke Castillo. She says, "You can change your thought patterns in order to think in a way that generates the energy that you need to create the result that you want." So that leads into that third aspect of internal motivation. So this is that motivating yourself with an inner drive. And all of you have some aspect of this, because in order to even be a physician, you have to have this. You have to have those skills of delayed gratification, tolerating frustration, and finding some kind of satisfaction in the current life while you're working towards that goal. So, but what is it that motivates our change? So this is something that finding that powerful thought that evokes that powerful emotion actually can create, that goal or results that you want. So becoming a physician, all of you have had to answer the question, well, why do you want to be a doctor? And as cliche as it sounds, actually knowing what is that thought and emotion that you have for being a physician can really keep that dream alive, and that can really help you get through residency. So writing it down, putting it on your phone, just being able to see it visually. And that applies to anything else you want to change in your life. If you're able to attach a strong emotion to that result that you're wanting, then that really does make the steps to getting to that result a lot easier when you're able to have that goal and strong emotion with it. So only you have the power to decide what you want for your life and the steps you take to become the better version of you. I'm going to say that one more time. Only you have the power to decide what you want for your life and the steps you take to become the better version of you. Your residency, your hospital, everyone around you can only do so much, but it's really your personal wellness starts with you. You taking those steps, you deciding, to reach out and to help yourself. So just remember that. And the next two last aspects of emotional intelligence has to do with your relationship with others. And remember that when you have a better relationship with yourself, you're actually able to have a better relationship with others. So these last two, so the fourth one is empathy, and that's recognizing those emotions in others. And then number 5 is social skills. So how well are you able to connect with people, to deal with difficult situations? And so that's kind of those two things. In the next couple slides, I'm going to talk about 5 categories in my mind of where people fall in relationships, and then some tips of what I've learned during residency that's helped me. So the 5 categories in my mind, like I said, of relationships. So you have your family or spouse, you have your friends, and then you have those mutual acquaintances. There are people that you don't dislike, and there are people that you don't really like per se. And then there's people that you actually do dislike, and then there's others, just people that you pass by or just come into contact with. So this is for family, spouse, and friends. So these are going to be the most important people in your life because they're going to keep you going. They're going to be your support system. They're going to keep you sane. But these people are also the ones that you're likely going to take for granted. Because, sometimes you're like, well, my spouse, they should understand. I'm just going to go to sleep. But really, we should take time, even if it's just 5 minutes, literally to talk to them on the phone or even text. If you're married, just at least, tell them that you're alive. It's it's really important, right, to keep those relationships close to you and to really nurture them with, as much as you can. So your residency family. So this is an interesting group of people because, this is going to include a lot of those categories. This is going to include those people that are your friends. They're also going to include mutual acquaintances. They're also going to include people that you don't like. And, it's like a family because in the sense that you don't really get to choose who's in your residency. I mean, you kind of want to, but at the end of the day, you really don't choose who's in your residency. But even if you don't get along, even if you don't really care that much, you should still treat each person with kindness and respect. And these are probably the people that you are going to spend a lot of time with, like more than your family, like more than your spouse or brother or sister. Like, you just say, hi everybody, we love each other because we are family. So this was my residency family. Some of them did become my friends, but there were some that were not my friends that I didn't like. But the one biggest thing is that I tried to treat each person that I worked with that kindness and respect. And even if they were, people I didn't like, even if they were a class below me, like interns, whoever they were, it's just treating them with kindness and respect because they're part of your family. You're gonna see the best in people, you're gonna see the worst in people. And so it's just important to realize that, these are gonna be your support system, but also, people that you have to work with, regardless of how you feel about it. And the people that you do become friends with, they're gonna be the ones that really understand what's going on. Because really, they're going through it with you too. And so they're gonna be the greatest support for you and probably drag you through. So this is Alicia. She was my best friend through residency. We started together, we had our first rotation together, and she literally dragged me through residency. Like, she got me through some of the really darkest times in my life. I remember trying to find her in the hospital, like, just so we can walk to our cars so that we can, like, have a little powwow. Because, honestly, I just needed that. And, some of you might be able to think of that person right now who you just go to like, powwow and be like, did you know that this happened to me? Like, you always have to have that person, right? And so that's why I show this slide. It's to remember that those people that are closest to you, that are your friends, they are gonna get you through. So what about those other people? What about the people that aren't your friends, that aren't your family, that aren't your spouse? Well, the first thing I wanna remind you of, remember the golden rule. Like, let's go back to kindergarten and remember this, treat others the way you wanna be treated. Because really, if you think about it, that is going to create a better environment for everyone. An environment where you can be supportive, an environment where you can learn together. And so that is something that's so important. So let's think about this. My least favorite rotation was ICU. But if you happen to love ICU, kudos to you. You can insert a rotation that you don't like. But let's think about this. So you realize next block you're going to be in ICU, and you look down, you're like, who's the residents I'm going to work with? So you look down and it's a person that, no, she's real rude, she doesn't work that hard, she's not very nice, she's always condescending, but like, why? Like, why is she condescending? I don't understand. Versus you have somebody that's actually your friend, somebody that you're like, oh, yes, I know we're gonna have a good time. Like, this will be hard, but it's fine. Like, she's gonna, we're gonna laugh, we're gonna do our notes together till like 10 p.m. Like, it's gonna be great. So you're still in the same rotation in both scenarios, right? Still the hardest rotation, but think about the difference. Like, the people that you work with make such a big difference. So if you're able to just treat each other kindly and be that the first person versus that second person that was really mean, don't be that person. Be the nice person. But also, the second tip I have is just really be careful with your words. Be careful with your actions. Mistakes are gonna happen. Things are gonna happen, and you're gonna be in a role where you're like, why did this happen? And then you just kind of act out, which it's hard to say, I definitely understand, but if you're able to practice that self-regulation, practice that, mindfulness of your words, your actions, that really makes a difference. And then also realizing, in the heat of the moment, we're going to say things that are mean. We're going to say things that are rude. But if you realize that and you're able to go to that person and be like, hey, I'm sorry that this happened, and make that genuine request, please forgive me, I'm sorry. That really makes a difference. Think of a time when somebody apologized to you, versus when they didn't. That really changes your perspective, right? And on the flip side, though, just realize you can't control other people's actions. You, as much as you want to, you can't. You can't control who they are. You can't control anything about them. The only thing you can control is yourself and how you react to those situations. And then the next one is kind of dealing with evaluations. We're always going to have an evaluation from either a senior resident or from an attending, and sometimes they're not going to be nice. They're going to be negative. But just remember that their opinion of you does not affect who you are as a person. Sometimes we can get things and be like, oh, well, I am a terrible person. That must mean I really suck. But if you're able to just realize that it doesn't affect who you are and you get to choose how you take that evaluation, that really does make a difference. And you're able to be more constructive with the information that's provided for you. And then this next one just goes back to just realizing that your words are powerful. And so, use them to uplift versus to destroy other people. It's amazing that we're in a profession that heals, but you walk out of that patient room and then you say something mean to, a nurse or another resident or somebody else, you can just destroy them just as easily. And the last thing is just take time to do simple acts of kindness. Just be compassionate to each other, and be helpful to each other, because you never know, by doing that, you could affect another person's life. And that could also be a connection that you make within your residency family or with other people. So if you've slept through the whole thing, which I totally get it, I understand, these are just kind of the things that I wanted you to take away from this presentation. So the first thing is that the relationships that we have with ourselves and with others is so important, especially having a positive relationship, and that has a huge impact on our personal wellness. And the 5 aspects of emotional intelligence that we talked about, so self-awareness, self-regulation, that internal motivation, the empathy and social skills. So those first 3 having to do with the relationship you have with yourself, and then the last 2 having to do with the relationship you have with others. And then knowing that everyone here, male, female, it doesn't matter, all of you can have this emotional intelligence. And you can apply it, you can learn it, you can improve on it. It's something that we can all have. And then learn to love yourself. I don't mean arrogance or prideful. I just mean really loving yourself, looking at the thoughts that you have towards yourself. Because once you start to love yourself, that really does affect how you treat other people too. And that going on that, your thoughts create your emotions. So your thoughts that you have are so powerful. Sometimes we're so driven by those emotions, like, oh, I'm so sad, or oh, I'm so, depressed. But looking at the thoughts that's actually creating those emotions can be just as powerful and give you that awareness that we talked about. And, this can be your Hogwarts, or I guess your Loma Linda, but accept help, ask for help. But, you have resources here, and you're going to have somebody that's going to talk about that. But, even with each other, you guys are support systems for each other as well. So just realize that. And then please, 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 please remember the golden rule. When treating patients, when treating each other, just remember that your words and your actions can have such positive results or it can have negative results. So just treat each other kindly, please. So that's all I have to share. If any of you guys have questions or, just need some encouragement or just want to talk, I'm definitely available. You can definitely email me. But otherwise, thank you so much for giving me your attention and for allowing me to share with you.
Thank you, Audrey. I did want to give some time for Jessica to come up and talk about the resources we have here. I know that Audrey is able to share some of the resources she had in Orlando. And so there were some brochures in the back. Make sure that you get it. If you're from RHS or SACS, we will be emailing that out too.
All right. Well, it's nice to see everyone. Lots of familiar faces. So I'm Jessica Chen Fang, and I'm here with